It was the scream that changed everything, not his mine. It ripped out of me so suddenly, so violently I didn't recognize it as my own. The blood had already soaked through my shirt when I fell to my knees next to him, his breath shallow, pupils blown wide. We were on the side of Route 38, headlights from passing cars streaking through the misted rain, and all I could hear were the distant echoes of tires screeching and the rhythmic thump of my own heart smashing against my ribs. It had started as a stupid, spontaneous trip, just two best friends escaping the mess back home, but in the span of a few minutes everything fractured. A deer, a bend in the road, and a moment too late, the car had spun. We'd slammed into a tree, he was conscious, barely. His hand reached for mine, blood smearing across my wrist, and that's when he whispered it, 3 words, 4 syllables. I love you. I didn't process it right away. Not because it was unexpected, no, if I'm being honest, maybe a part of me always knew, but because of when he said it, because he was slipping, because I thought I was going to lose him. We'd grown up like brothers, backyard wrestling, first beers under the bleachers. He'd held me the night my mom left. I'd lied for him when his dad found the glitter on his jacket. We were everything to each other, but I never thought he'd actually say it, not out loud, not to me. And definitely not like that, half broken, pinned beneath a crumpled dashboard with his face slicked in red. The ambulance sirens were still a whisper in the distance when his grip started to weaken. You were always it, he said, voice trembling like he was confessing to God, not me. Even when I hated myself, you made it feel okay. That was the first time I ever realized what true fear felt like, not the fear of death, but of truth. The raw, guttural honesty that someone hides their entire life and then lays bare in their final moments. He had spent years hiding, folding himself into a version of masculinity that kept people guessing, but I saw him, I always saw him. Still, I had no idea how deeply he saw me, and now under the black sky I was terrified I'd never get the chance to respond, not the way I wanted, not the way he deserved. As they pulled him from the wreckage, his hand slipped from mine. And just like that, he was gone, or so I thought. The days that followed were a blur, a hospital room, the faint hum of machines, the sound of footsteps that never quite seemed to stop, always pacing, always waiting. I had been forced to sit in the silence of his absence for hours, the world outside moving on, indifferent to the wreckage left behind. It wasn't until they gave me his belongings, his jacket, his wallet, his phone, that everything hit me like a freight train. I found myself gripping his phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through messages, not knowing why I couldn't just let go, a mix of texts from old friends, casual stuff. But there was one message buried between group chats that made my stomach twist. It was from him, sent just hours before the accident. I need to tell you something. I can't do this alone anymore. I love you. My heart stuttered, the words sinking deep into me like a brand. They weren't meant for me to see, not this. It was a confession, a cry for help, but I had never seen it. I had never understood. How could I? I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for him to change everything between us, not like this. Not after a lifetime of friendship that we had carefully built around unspoken understandings, half-truths, and little white lies. I thought I had all the time in the world to figure it out, to catch up, to understand whatever was wrong inside him. But now I didn't have that luxury. His confession, so stark and sudden in that last text, hung in the air like an accusation. Why didn't I know? Why didn't I see the signs? That night I sat in my car, his phone still in my lap, and the weight of it all pressed down on me. I could still feel the cold grip of his hand, the warmth of his body in the ambulance as they worked on him. I hadn't even told him I loved him back. Not before everything shattered. I had opened my mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but the words had stuck. They were stuck like glass in my throat, and by the time I found my voice, he was already unconscious. All the unspoken feelings between us, the things I thought I'd have time to say, had been swallowed by that crash. I started dialing. It wasn't a rational decision. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, maybe for some miracle, for some sign that he was still out there somewhere hearing me. Maybe I thought I could reach him one last time, but as the phone rang on the other end, I realized it wasn't about him. It was about me and about what I had missed. It was about the wall I had built between us all these years, unwilling to face the truth, unwilling to let myself see what was right in front of me. His confession was a final, desperate plea, and in my silence I had broken him. The voice on the other end picked up, but it wasn't him, it was a voicemail. Hey, it's me. If you're hearing this, well, I guess it means I didn't get to tell you everything I wanted to, and I'm sorry, but you always knew, didn't you? My heart stopped. That's when I realized that somehow, in some twisted way, I had always known. The twists in his smiles, the softness in his eyes, the way he held me just a little longer than necessary, the times he looked at me when he thought I wasn't looking, I had known, and now I had lost him, and I didn't know how to live with that. The funeral was a blur, like everything was seen through a fogged window. People said things I couldn't quite hear. There was the endless sea of handshakes, hugs, and faces I barely recognized. His parents, broken in ways I didn't know were possible, his brother too angry to cry, too numb to speak. And then there was me standing at the edge of the crowd alone like a ghost no one had invited. No one asked me to speak. I wasn't family. I was just the friend who had failed. But I needed to say something. I had to. I owed him that, didn't I? I had no idea how to express what I felt or what I didn't know I felt until it was too late. But in the quiet of the cemetery, the only sound the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind, I found myself walking to the small podium, the heaviness of it all pulling me forward. I wasn't sure if I even had words at first, or if I was just trying to fill the hollow silence that felt like it would swallow me whole. But when I opened my mouth, it wasn't the grief that came out first. It was anger, a burning, white-hot rage that caught me by surprise. How could you do this to me? I found myself asking aloud, the words coming out like a prayer, a curse, a confession. How could you leave me with nothing but questions? I could feel the eyes of the gathered mourners on me, but I couldn't stop. You gave me your heart in a text, a message, no more, no less. You didn't even give me the chance to say anything back. How could you do that? How could you expect me to carry this when you never told me the truth? When you left me with your love wrapped in a goddamn riddle? I felt myself trembling, a storm of emotions warring inside me. Everyone there, they all thought I was mourning the loss of a friend, a brother, and I was, but I was also mourning the loss of the chance to know him, to know the version of him that loved me, to know the version of me he had seen. In a way, I felt betrayed. He had built a life with me, a lie, an illusion. He had let me love him not for who he truly was, but for who I thought he was. The thing was, I didn't even know who he was. I had never asked. He had been my safe space, the person who made the world feel like it made sense. But I hadn't given him the same courtesy. And now I had lost him, lost that piece of him, and all that was left were the wreckage of things unsaid, all of it suddenly crashing down on me. But there was a twist to it all. As I stood there, lost in my own grief, I saw her, his sister. She wasn't at the front, didn't make herself known until now. She was standing off to the side, watching me with eyes full of understanding, sadness, and something else, something more. She stepped forward quietly until she was next to me at the podium. Without saying a word, she handed me an envelope. My hands shook as I took it, and the ink on the paper was smudged as though it had been written in haste, but it was unmistakable. It was his handwriting. I knew you'd be angry, the note started, and I knew you'd blame yourself, but I want you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to love you out loud. I froze. For a moment, the ground beneath me felt like it was going to give way. I looked up at her as if she held the answers to everything. She just nodded, her eyes filled with an understanding that made my heart ache. You were his world. He needed you to know, but he didn't know how to say it. He was scared just like you were. And in that moment, the storm inside me quieted. The anger faded, replaced with a quiet sense of acceptance. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't enough, but it was real, and I wasn't the only one who had missed the truth. The weeks after the funeral were almost unbearable. The world kept turning, as it always does, without pause or care for the grief we carry inside. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. Everything, every corner of my apartment, every familiar path I took, every song on the radio felt like a reminder that he was gone. But what hurt most was the emptiness, the silence where his laugh used to fill the space, the hollow quiet where his presence should have been. It took a while before I could even pick up the phone again, let alone face the people who still didn't understand. People who whispered about how I'd been so close to him but never really understood what that meant. I had so many conversations that started with "you two were inseparable," but ended with awkward glances and half-hearted pats on the back. And then one night, as I sat in my apartment with the lights dimmed low, trying to escape the constant whirl of thoughts in my head, I got another message. It wasn't from him, not directly. It was from his sister again. She'd been quiet for a while, her presence like a shadow in my periphery. I almost didn't want to open the text. I wasn't ready for more words, more confessions, more closure. But when I did, I read something that caught my breath. It was a photo, a blurry picture of him, but it wasn't just any picture. It was one from years ago, a Polaroid yellowed with age. It was us laughing under the streetlights, the world fading around us. And on the back, in his familiar handwriting, were four words: always you, always love. I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my hand, tears filling my eyes in a way I hadn't expected. The weight of that picture, the clarity of it, hit me harder than anything else. I had thought all this time that I had missed him by inches, by seconds, that I hadn't had the chance to say what I should have. But now, looking at that old photo, I understood. We had always been there. We had always loved each other, even if we hadn't known how to say it. Even when we pretended. Even when we were afraid to face the truth about ourselves. I reached for the phone again, fingers shaking. There was a text waiting in the thread. He wanted you to know it was always you, not just the friend, but more, always more. I didn't reply, I didn't know how to, but I finally understood something I hadn't allowed myself to before. Love wasn't about perfect timing. It wasn't about finding the right words. It was in the moments we shared, in the years we spent together, and in the quiet understanding that had always existed between us. I stayed up that night staring at the photo. The ache in my chest did lessen, but something inside me shifted. It wasn't about the what-ifs anymore. It was about the fact that, for however brief a moment, we had loved each other in ways that had never needed to be explained. The truth, in all its messy, untidy beauty, had always been right there in front of me. I had just needed to let myself see it, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Months passed before I could even look at the photo without feeling like I was suffocating. I carried it with me, hidden in my wallet, a small reminder of what we had, of the love that was never spoken but always there. Slowly, I began to rebuild, or perhaps it was better to say I began to rediscover myself. I found solace in little things. The quiet mornings where I drank coffee alone, the late nights where I let my thoughts wander without the weight of the past pulling me back. I took long walks through the places we had explored together, places I had avoided at first because they felt too much like his ghost, too much like the life we could have shared had I just opened my heart. But eventually, I started to breathe again. And as I did, I realized that the anger I had been holding on to, the anger that had kept me chained to my grief, was finally dissolving. And then came the day I received an unexpected call. It was from his brother. We had barely spoken after the funeral, the tension thick between us, his bitterness like an impenetrable wall. But when I picked up the phone, there was no anger in his voice, no accusations. Just a quiet, raw emotion I hadn't expected. "I found something," he said, his voice cracking. "I think you need to see this." It was a recording, a voice memo. It was his, my friend's voice, the one I had thought I'd never hear again. I held my breath as the familiar tone of his voice flooded my ears. "Hey, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone. I just wanted to tell you something. You deserve to know I loved you. I didn't say it enough. I didn't show it enough. But it was always you. I just couldn't say it because I was afraid. I was afraid of losing you, of everything falling apart. But the truth is I would have lost you either way, so here it is, you're my heart. You always were." The words cracked open something in me, something I thought had already shattered beyond repair. I had been angry at him, angry that he had left me with all these questions. But now I realized he had been just as terrified as I was, just as broken, just as human. I closed my eyes, the weight of his confession settling into my bones. I wasn't the only one who had been carrying the burden of unsaid things. He had been too, and in some way we had always carried each other, even when we didn't know how to admit it. When I ended the call, I found myself standing in the middle of the apartment, holding nothing but air. The grief wasn't gone, but it had softened. And suddenly I realized that this wasn't the end of my story with him. It had never been about perfect timing or the right words. It had been about love in all its imperfect, raw, and messy forms. He had given me the most precious thing he had, his truth, and now I had to learn to carry it, not as a burden, but as a gift. I took the photo from my wallet and placed it on the table in front of me, the picture of us laughing, carefree. I smiled, the first real smile I had allowed myself in months, and whispered, "I love you too." And for the first time, I truly meant it, not just in memory, but in the here and now. The day he came out to me, the day he loved me, was not the ending I had imagined. It wasn't the closure I thought I needed. It was just another part of the journey. A journey where love in all its forms would continue to guide me, even in the absence of the one person who had once been my whole world. The journey wasn't over, it had only just begun.